It is definitely being recorded. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us today for our wonderful guest speaker. I'm so excited to introduce you to Stephen Brown, who has been a wonderful official friend of KSU, an advocate for our students, and just an all around great contact and resource for our students. So I'm so pleased that he's joined us here. In addition, as I've mentioned, Stephen is one of the inspirations for the course because of his background. He has been a film reviewer. He's going to talk about that in just a little bit. Just so many unique things that all come from a love of movies, which is really why we are here in this class. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Stephen tell you a little bit more about himself, and then we'll have some questions. I've got some questions for Stephen. I've always got questions for Stephen. I love to hear his take on so many things, including, of course, the Oscars. And then we will open it up to student questions as well. So, Stephen, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Dr. Hutchins, it's a pleasure to join you and Joshua, Claire, Tina, Gwen, Victoria, all the people on today. My full-time job is here at Cookerly Public Relations. I'm in Buckhead. And so I really love my job in public relations. Obviously, I was a journalism major. And I love the fact that your school has these pop culture tracks because it's so relevant. I say that we can't have a good brainstorm for our client products without having people who understand a lot about what's going on in fashion, movies, and music. It's one of those few industries where watching the Grammys or the Oscars or the Tonys can be really helpful to knowing what's rising up to the level of what's being talked about in New York and California and countries around the world. But obviously my side hustle is being a movie reviewer. So I run the Silver Screen Capture website, which is a site I started about 10 years ago. And I happen to have reviewed movies since third grade. So I'm in my 50s now and have always reviewed movies, whether it was for the school paper, for the school newsletter, for different free news weeklies like Creative Loafing, Preview Magazine, a lot of places. So being able to continually review movies on the side the last 10 years has been amazing. And I do love following the Oscars. I've been following the ups and downs of some of the campaigns this year. And we'll look forward to talking to all of you about what's trending high and what we might see. I did get to go to the Oscars one year, so it was about 10 years ago. It was my little badge. Had less facial hair and was more youth. And but it was the year that Spotlight won. It was the year where the controversy was Oscars so white because there were no minorities up for any of the top four acting roles. And it's been better since then. I think the international quality of the Oscars lately has brought a lot more types of movies in and a lot more types of actors in. But it was really fascinating to get to see all of it in action and just look forward to Dr. Hutchins' questions and talking to all of you.
So thank you so much. Stephen, I think it's just so incredible that you started reviewing movies in third grade. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that happened and why you've stuck with it?
Sure. I was always deeply into movies and plays. My parents took me to a lot of them from a very young age. Back when I was young, there was even a thing, it was before VHS tapes, before DVDs or Blu-rays or on demand. And you used to be able to rent a movie projector to have at your house. And so for my birthday parties at a young age, we would rent a projector. My parents would show a Disney movie or whatever. You'd lace up the projection wheel and play it right through with the light and everything. So I always had movie parties. And that was just always something I was very into. In kindergarten, I was the kid who brought, you're supposed to bring your collection or show and tell day. And I brought a collection of HBO guides, which were for at the time, the cable news channel, which I guess is part of the Max streaming service now. And basically all the kids would say, hey, Stephen, tell us, how long this movie is. And I'd be like, oh, it's an hour and 42 minutes and it has adult situations, adult language and mild violence or whatever it was. So I would remember all the different statistics about movies. So I was just always into it. My first reviews were for Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade and the original Tim Burton Batman and Dead Poet Society. So just was always into watching movies and reviewing them.
And when did you decide to, kind of start your own website, and how did that kind of come about?
My sister-in-law saw me putting a lot of reviews up on Facebook, and she was collecting them, and she's a web developer. So she actually made a little WordPress site for me and surprised me one Christmas where I was like, "Hey, I've started a website for you. You just tell me what you want to call it, and we'll name it that." And Silver Screen Capture was supposed to be a hybrid of silver screen, like the old name for movies, and then screen capture, the notion of sort of taking a screen cap on the internet. So trying to make sure that it was sort of capsule reviews that were relatively short. They've gotten longer as I've gone on because I have more to say. They're supposed to be really brief, and sometimes I'd write them before I'd even leave the theater. I would just write them and then go my merry way. Sometimes I will now see a couple movies a week and I'll get behind. But in fact, this week I was trying to watch the online Sundance movies, and there was only one that I was super excited by. I planned to have some friends over to see it on Saturday night, and it had gotten pulled because people were pirating it off the online Sundance. It was the Dylan O'Brien movie called Twinless, which got a lot of acclaim out of Sundance. And so that was my last botched attempt to see a movie, was Saturday night, where they took it off the streaming service. So had it ripped out of my hands before I got to see it. So I guess when it comes out in theaters in a couple of months, I'll get to see it.
With the rest of us, right?
Exactly, with everybody else.
In fact, one time I was looking for a photo of the cast of a movie so I could include it in one of my lectures, and I found that they'd had a panel here or something, and so I was looking for photos of that. And of course, what came up first, Stephen, was a picture of you interviewing the cast of the Blind Spotting. I think you were standing
That's
outside
hilarious. That's great.
the Plaza Theater. I'll have to look for that one. So
Daveed
I
Diggs
mean,
movie.
yes, yes, yes. And so I think you're definitely in tune with the Atlanta film community. And can you tell us a little bit about that and your experiences there and what we have to offer here?
Absolutely. So I think it's super easy to get involved in the Atlanta film scene. Or I wish I'd known how easy it was back in the day, but I've gotten involved on the Atlanta Film Festival group. I know it's got a full name, the Atlanta Film. There's another word after it that's not festival, but there's definitely a group. It's run by Christopher Escobar, who also owns the Plaza and Terra movie theaters in downtown Atlanta. And he's just very involved in bringing together the film community. And the film festival happens every year. In fact, it's going to be pretty soon. It's the spring. And they have a lot of opportunities open to the public. You can get passes for certain movies, but the opening night shows are usually something pretty big. In fact, last year's opening night or their closing night was Sing Sing last year, which has been really talked about in Oscar circles. It didn't get as many nominations as people were thinking, but it was one of those ones that was a big hopeful. But I got to interview the director and cast members there on last year's red carpet. And there's just been a lot of opportunities. I got to interview the cast of Everybody Wants Some a few years ago, which the people weren't famous at the time, but it's become like Tyler Hoechlin from the Superman TV show, and Glenn from whose last name is escaping me all of a sudden, but the famous Glenn right now, who's with the
Oh,
city.
Glenn Powell.
Thank you, Powell.
Yeah, yes, the
And
new Tom
Hitman.
Cruise. Yes.
So a lot of different stars in that, but the Atlanta Film Festival is a great way to get involved. They have a lot of things throughout the year, a pretty nominal fee to be a member. And then the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival comes up next month, I think at the end of this month. And I've gotten involved in it from the 25th anniversary committee. And so I've already been watching some of the movies as early screeners to review for it, and some pretty interesting ones there. You'd think it might just be all things that are just sort of stories about Israel and the like, but it's a lot of things. I just watched a documentary that's premiering on Oscar Sunday in the daytime about Diane Warren, who is the oft-nominated Best Original Song person. She's the songwriter who's been nominated 15 times for the Best Original Song Oscar and has never won. So she's even up this year. It's for a Tyler Perry movie with Kerry Washington, song called The Journey that's sung by her, the rap artist. And she's been up for all sorts of songs that you'd recognize, like I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. I think that was from Armageddon by Aerosmith.
Yes.
And even really old ones like If We Could Build This Dream Together from Mannequin, just all sorts of movies from the 80s, 90s, and beyond. And she is always up for an Oscar. The one prediction you can always make is that she'll be nominated, no matter what the year, no matter what the song. She was up for like a documentary where Lady Gaga sang her song a couple years ago. Even last year, there was a song from the Cheetos movie called Flamin' Hot. Even that song was nominated for an Oscar. It was up against the Barbie songs and lost, but she's always nominated. But there's a movie about her in the Jewish Film Festival that comes out in a few weeks.
Wonderful. So our class, yeah, now that you mentioned, obviously we have to talk about the Oscars and what's how did you get into obviously that goes hand in hand with film reviewing, but kind of how did you get into the Oscars, and then, talk a little bit about what you think the Oscars really mean. And, we've talked in class about, what are some of the benefits of the Oscars to the industry, as well as maybe some of the issues, and just kind of, do we as goers, should we have more say in the Oscars as well? What are your thoughts on all things Oscar?
Yeah, well, I remember the first Oscars I ever watched. I think I was 13. I don't think I knew about it really as much immediately growing up. I knew what an Oscar movie was, but I don't know if I watched the ceremony. But the first one I ever watched was The Last Emperor one, and it was definitely a lot of movies that sounded like things I'd never seen. Growing up in Greenville, South Carolina, a lot of these movies didn't really even play our town. They almost had to win an Oscar for it to come to your local multiplex. And so that was always exciting to me because it felt like sort of a clearinghouse or a marketplace of movies that should be remembered. For better or worse, even the worst Oscar movies, or the ones that go down in history as not being the best choices of the best, are still remembered. And so there's often times where it's like, oh, I can't believe that Crash beat Brokeback Mountain, or that so and so, that Coda beat Power of the Dog, or other movies that maybe the critics thought were the best one. And for whatever reason, especially because of the preferential ballot that happens, oftentimes the movie that is the consensus choice as opposed to the very best ends up winning. So after they do the ballots for Best Picture, they eliminate all the ones that got last place, and then they count them again until they've got somebody that's consensus majority of first place prizes. So you oftentimes can say like, oh, I think this is a movie that probably won't get that many number ones on the top tens until they're all counted. But I just remember loving watching it. I knew that maybe the Oscar winning Best Picture wasn't always going to be the best movie of the year, but might be something that said something about society at that point. It could be that the year that Forrest Gump beat Pulp Fiction, which again would be another chance of like, oh, I think a lot of people like both movies, but they think Pulp Fiction's the preferred cinematic achievement. It was maybe a time where America needed that optimism, and the Robert Zemeckis, who had directed Back to the Future and lots of those kinds of really exciting, happy movies, that Forrest Gump was like a sort of a capping of an achievement for him. Tom Hanks was the American everyman, and the idea about seeing in him some optimism for America really worked at the time. And Pulp Fiction was sort of by a new guy on the scene, Quentin Tarantino, who people didn't know him as much. He'd made one other movie before, and they're like, wow, this movie kind of came out of nowhere and was great. But so Forrest Gump is immortally the best picture that year. Pulp Fiction was up for Best Picture. And I think it's kind of when they used to be five as opposed to 8, 9, or 10 Best Pictures.
Mm-hmm.
It really was sort of that defining couple of movies of the year that really mattered. You'd have your box office champion usually, but then your 5 to 10 best pictures were sort of the critics' consensus or the Hollywood's consensus of what is best. A couple of years ago, they recommended having a sort of a most popular category, and it went down in flames pretty fast. I think there is an elitism to the Oscars that they definitely want to at least say that because they are in these branches, because they're working in these different crafts, that they get a chance to vote for their peers, as opposed to making it public. I remember one year they tried to do sort of a an American Idol style counting of America's favorites, and it was like Justice League or something won a lot of the awards, and I think that didn't go over that well, so they sort of got rid of that feature. The best we can do is bet on it, or the best we can do is make our prediction.
Yes, yes, and we bet on it, informally and in friendly bets at Oscar parties, which I know that you host a great Oscar party every year.
That's right. So
And
at an
yeah,
Oscar
tell us
party,
about.
we have kind of our ballots,
Nice.
and you decide, if you've predicted things correctly. When the commercial break comes, we turn the volume down and we give a prize out to an immediate tabulation of who guessed it correctly.
I love that. And I noticed too, you have your board behind you with some of the nominees here.
That's right. I've got a little wicket here. You might be able to see that there's some Brutalist going on above there. I did bring some swag to show your class. This is just interesting. We'll
Please.
definitely talk about the Emilia Perez controversies of the past week, but Netflix has been sending lots of things to people who are movie critics. So you have everything from a Selena Gomez double album that's got her song and Zoe Saldana's song that they sent. You'll get screenplays that are sent from the different movies, whether it's Nickel Boys, and then some ones that didn't do as well, like Maria and the Piano Lesson. But early on in the season, they're trying to get interest in those. And then things like The Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan movie, postcard set. This one wasn't sent to me, but I love the substance. And this is the little substance injectable that you could have to be able to clone your DNA and become young and beautiful again. So definitely exciting to get the different pieces of swag that people are sending in hopes of standing out in the long road to Oscar.
Yes, and so as a PR expert and as somebody who has gone into public relations, and now you're also on the receiving end of all of the swag and all of the publicity efforts. What do you think about how that influences who's nominated for Oscars and just kind of
Yeah.
the awards in general?
Two different studios that have become very popular in the last couple of years have done a masterful job on the campaigning season. A24 and Neon Pictures, what they send to the critics and they send to people who are campaigning, or who potentially vote, there's an entire booklet they send that's of all the DVDs of the movies. So you basically have this little booklet that you open up and it has the little discs in it. Most of the time we're digital now, where it's all things that you can do on your digital platforms, but it still matters that you're sent this little booklet that basically shows, like, our neon films this year were so great that you can flip through it and see a Nora and something else, and maybe some lesser known movies. It gives kind of a prestige factor to sort of our studios offerings. And I've seen them do that a lot more than others. In some cases, you'll get huge coffee table books that are, beautiful pictures of the cinematography of movies. And it all kind of goes towards making sure that a movie is seen as prestigious. They'll send pictures of costumes that are drawn. This year, there were a lot of people trying to get a song from Will and Harper, the documentary with Will Ferrell, and a friend that had transitioned. They were taking a road trip together, and Kristen Wiig wrote the song for it. So they were sending the song around. They were sending out these different music sheets that sort of had the words to the song in hopes they could get a nomination. And it doesn't always work, but it definitely can't hurt things to send some swag.
Yes, I remember as a student journalist, I received a press kit for like Water for Chocolate, and that had a recipe for the chicken and rose petals. I think was the recipe featured in the film that created such a romantic response in folks when it was made.
Oh,
So there's definitely so
great movie
many.
recommendation, by the way.
Yes, yeah, it's a terrific movie, and
Last
and
year, I
and
got
you.
sent a recipe. I got sent a recipe from the movie May December. Evidently,
Oh.
Julianne Moore's character makes a pineapple upside down cake in it, where she's hosting Natalie Portman to play the part of her in Savannah, and literally got sent a recipe for the cake.
See, there's all kinds of stuff there. Yeah, so I think that in general, what do you think about this year's nominees, and what are some of your, maybe some of your predictions, maybe some of your observations, and do your predictions kind of change during the awards, from the time from nomination to the awards ceremony?
Absolutely. Well, I will go through first the top 10 best pictures. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about their trajectory on Oscars. A little bit, there's some of them that I didn't really even like that much this year, which is sort of funny because all my fellow movie critics love Anora, and I didn't really love it. And a lot of them loved A Complete Unknown, and I didn't really love it. So those were two that maybe everybody else really liked that I didn't care as much about. But I'll tell you, sort of the predictions were always that Anora was really early on the scene as a festival darling, and it's by A24. A24, A24
Mhm.
Neon, I forget, but it was definitely by one of the, this might be Neon actually. It was definitely by one of these darling film studios. And because Sean Baker had done a lot of movies that had been real hits, which I liked all of his movies better than this one. I like Tangerine and Red Rocket and Florida Project, all better than Anora, but even so, there's
Interesting.
Anora. But it was considered, like, I think it peaked like in about September. It was considered like, oh, a front runner for Best Picture, Mickey Madison. And I think it's just sort of maybe fallen off a little bit. So it's still a big front runner. It's up for all the right categories, but maybe fallen off a little bit. Then The Brutalist, the A24 people have definitely played that one up as by holding it for as long as they could, having some early influencers talk about it, having it only play in some specialized theaters, really holding on for the Oscar season to peak in hopes that it would peak at the same time. So I would say it's probably a top 3 contender right now as people are going to be voting next week for the Oscars. And then A Complete Unknown, that one's really peaking right now. So it came out on Christmas Day. It didn't play festivals, but all of a sudden, I would say like the boomers in the Academy really love it because it's about Bob Dylan, and it's like, oh, I remember Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and all these people. But then it's got that extra idea that the younger people in the Academy love Timothy Chalamet. So it's like all of a sudden you've got him showing up on Game Day and Saturday Night Live and kind of being ubiquitous. So all of a sudden it's buzzing at just the right time. Then you've got Conclave, which I've always said is that kind of movie that even though it peaked maybe in September, if other things started falling down, that's the kind of movie that nobody disliked in Hollywood. They all thought it was a perfectly good movie. They enjoyed it, and it could do really well. The problem is it didn't get nominated for Best Director, and that's usually
Mhm.
a bad sign. Doesn't mean you can't win. It's just usually a bad sign. Dune Part 2 had the misfortune of opening back in February or March. So even though it got great reviews at the time, it has fallen off the radar completely. And it got a couple of nominations, but I don't think anybody is predicting Dune 2 for Best Picture, even though that might be their favorite. Emilia Perez has had quite a rocky campaign season. They got a near record of 13 nominations, but I think I can't even keep up with how many controversies have happened down to the past hour. But its main actress has had some unearthed tweets, definitely some things that she was hiding on X that all of a sudden have come back to haunt her. And then some of her reactions to those reactions have been even worse. It's like doubling down on things. She's been uninvited to the Critics Association and some other places this week where they were going to have her out trotting about things about the movie. That plus the fact that it's from a French director set in Mexico, but filmed in France, that maybe don't feel like it represents the Mexican or the trends experience. All that perfectly make it feel like it went from the belle of the ball to a precipitous fall. So now people are like wondering, will even Zoe Saldana, who's been a shoe-in for supporting actress, will she still win? Or is it going to be starting to be shut out? It still could win everything. You never know. Sometimes the Academy will just put its heels down and like, I don't care about all these things. Maybe this is mean campaigning from A24 or somebody, and the brutalist people are just putting this out there because they'd had their controversy about AI 2 weeks ago. So that some of the Hungarian
Yes.
accents were tweaked and that sort of thing. I
Hmm.
mentioned I'm still, oh, I didn't mention, I get confused every time between A Complete Unknown and I'm Still Here. Because there
I
was
do
that movie
too.
called I'm Not Here that was about Bob Dylan a few years ago. But I'm Still
Right.
Here is peaking right now too. So this is the Brazilian movie with Fernando Torres. I just saw it the other night. It is excellent. And anybody who sees it is going to think that they saw one of the best female performances of the year. It was a surprise nomination completely, probably wouldn't win Best Picture, but to have Emilia Perez representing France and I'm Still Here representing Brazil in the top 10 best pictures is a sure
Hmm.
sign that our international films are taking over the Oscars. Nickel Boys, I think that was a surprise that that got in. I think a lot of people are um, really think it's a cinematic feat because the whole movie is shown from first person. So you're basically watching what the characters see, which is sort of an interesting way to see a movie. And it's important. It's an adapted screenplay from a famous novel, award-winning novel. But I think it's probably has not much of a chance. The release structure of it didn't really get out much, and they sort of canceled some cities for it. So I think we'll probably be seeing it streaming pretty soon. And I just don't think it's taken off like they thought. The Substance, I think a lot of people are pretty surprised it's up for Best Picture because it's so gross and it's such a science fiction, body horror, fantasy kind of movie.
Hmm.
But some people do love it. I'm one of those. I think it's amazing, but I don't think anybody thinks it's going to win Best Picture. And then the last one is Wicked, and Wicked sort of peaked around Thanksgiving. It came out. People thought it wasn't going to be good. They thought the commercials didn't look good. It was getting kind of some bad buzz. Then it came out, and everybody who saw it, who wanted to see it, loved it, and they thought it was better. And people who weren't even familiar with the Broadway show saw it and loved it. And Ariana and Cynthia had been on the awards, been on all the different social channels, doing all kind of fun things, and people really like Jonathan Bailey and some of the other people there. So it was doing all the right things. It still could do really well, but I think the logic in the Academy is that since it's a two-part movie, since we've got Wicked 1 this year and
Hmm.
Wicked for Good next year, if we really, really, really like the second one, we can honor both of them next year.
Hmm.
So that kind of makes people punt it a little bit to next year in the same way as the three Lord of the Rings movies all got nominated, but only the third one won Best Picture. It's because, well, we like Fellowship of the Ring, we like Two Towers, but finally, when Return of the King happened, it got nominated for all awards and won. So Dune 1 and 2 is even more confusing because there's supposed to be a Dune Messiah. So for a while, it's like, well, did Dune 1 before, maybe Dune 2? And it was like, well, maybe we'll give Denis Villeneuve his due when the third one comes out.
They do like to honor the entire body of work in a lot of ways. Sometimes
They
it's,
do. Sometimes you'll see something that is a body of work. A lot of people probably won't watch Demi Moore in The Substance, but they saw her great speech at the Golden Globes and
yes.
about she'd never won an acting prize before, and they just remember her from Few Good Men and Ghost and all these movies growing up. And they're like, you know what? I'm voting for her. Like the other performances may be good, but I'm going to award her body of work, so to speak. And
Hmm.
that does happen sometimes. It may not be someone's best movie they win for, but sometimes the way the specific nominations happen can play in somebody's favor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. So many great insights there. I love it. So I'd like to open it up to our students. Your students, you're welcome to unmute and ask Stephen a question, or if you'd like to put it in the chat. And we have a comment in the chat that Olivia says the Atlanta Film Society. She's a big fan of Chris and all he does for the Plaza and Terra. So
Thank you. Society was the word I was forgetting. I
that's
see
right.
Claire unmuted. Did Claire have a question? Or maybe not.
I don't see, yeah, no, I don't think I see her
Let's see.
microphone. So, yeah. But please feel free to jump in.
Okay, so let's see. Do you have any
Ah, you got it.
recommendations for finding publications that submit student work? Interesting. I don't necessarily know publications that do that for student work. I will say that being able to have a short film, there are definitely websites that allow you to enter all the film festivals, whether you're a student or anyone. In fact, I made a movie with a friend where I live. I live in Trilith neighborhood in Fayetteville, Georgia, where there's a big movie studio. It's part of the neighborhood. So I've met a lot of people who make films there, and somebody recruited me into making a film noir murder mystery kind of 10-minute movie. And we submitted it to a portal. I'd have to look up the name of the portal. And lo and behold, we won like best screenplay in the crime and noir film festival in Baltimore or something. So there's actually like some ways where you can actually upload your movie and be considered for a full year for your movie. And I think you pay kind of a nominal fee for entering the ones that you want to enter. So it could be like, you enter the Baltimore crime film festival for $30, which we're glad we did because that's the one we won. I don't think we won anything else, but yeah, so there's definitely portals for that, I think, to enter short films in particular.
Very cool, and congrats.
Well, thank you. I will forever have the Baltimore.
That's right. You're beloved in Baltimore. Oh, she meant written articles like film reviews.
Oh, film reviews. Oh, that's even better.
And you used to fax your reviews as well. I love that.
That is hilarious. I did used to. When I was in college, we didn't have email yet, and I had to fax my reviews to one place. I had to go into our student newspaper and type in my review there. I'd print it there, then I'd fax it to the other place. But it's pretty funny. So there probably are a lot of people that would accept other contributions. I would definitely consider, publishing some on my site as well. I've had at least one friend who was a KSU graduate who published a few reviews on my site, and I would say, like, probably if it's a movie or two that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, I'd be glad to assign it. I don't really have compensation to give at this point because I'm not even paid for my own movie review site. I'll probably sink more money into it than I do. But I certainly value anybody who wants to get writing samples and would be glad to help share something like that if one were interested.
Thank you so much. And also, and I did want to ask you, were there some reviewers that you like and you would recommend?
Yeah, so I definitely follow a lot of reviewers. I definitely read the New York Times reviews. I definitely read things that are on RogerEbert.com. Roger Ebert was my favorite movie reviewer while he was alive. And so I used to grow up watching, there was the Siskel and Ebert show where they kind of coined the 2 thumbs up notion. And they also had a lot of sleeper hit movies where they would talk about a movie that didn't get wide distribution, didn't get widely seen, but was worth watching. And so I think that's what a lot of the art films are nowadays, where it's like, it's not the big movie like a Wicked or a Gladiator. It's just something that a lot of people don't know but would recommend. And so, yeah, I definitely, I probably nowadays, like a lot of people, I go to Rotten Tomatoes and I click on the reviews that I want to read more about. But definitely the New Yorker, New York Times, definitely there's some folks, even in Charlotte here, there's a guy, I think it's Matt Goldberg, but definitely just lots of people have really good following, and I follow them on X. I follow a lot of YouTubers that write about and cover the Oscar season. So I kind of have a combination of people who are reviewing movies and those who are prognosticating about the Oscars. I don't read other people's reviews before I write mine. So there's a couple times where I have been out of step with what other people have said. I knew Anora was definitely getting a lot of buzz, and I went to see it while I was in New York. I was like, oh, it's playing early here. I can go see it there. And it wasn't 3 hours long, but I feel like far into the 2.5 hour, I was definitely losing patience with her character and the plot. And I thought I was going to really love it at the beginning. I don't know. Didn't hit me.
There's something for everyone.
There is something I know people who it's their favorite movie of the year.
Yeah, for sure. What are your other oh, there you go. What do you think are some of the biggest snubs of this year? Lots of awesome movies honored this year, but I was definitely bummed to see some films overlooked or only get a few noms. Sing Sing for Best Picture, A Different Man, Reznor and Ross's Challenger score. I agree with that one for sure.
Yeah,
I loved
Challengers
Challengers
is
and I
one that
loved the score. Yeah.
Challengers came out early in the year. Luca Guadagnino did both Challengers and Queer this year. One was the beginning of the year, one was at the end. Both
Mhm.
got pretty much wiped out. And I think a lot of people did think the Oscars have loved the Trent and Atticus scores before, but they've liked them when they seemed a little bit more traditional. So when they've written, they wrote uh, Soul, I guess, for Pixar. And so
Mhm.
they definitely won their Oscar for some things like that. And when they've actually, in this case, where they sort of have scored challengers with sort of club beats, it just didn't follow the exact way the people in the music crafts like their music. It didn't mean that it wasn't the most innovative, or when you think of that movie, you think of the way that the story was told, and there's some scenes that you can't even hear because of the thumping bass and all that. I thought it really worked to give off the vibe that
Mhm.
that movie was trying to do. And then they won at Golden Globes, so people are like, "Oh, certainly it would be up for Best Song." It's buzzed about, and it just happened that Challengers was probably something across the board that either a lot of the Academy people didn't see, or if they saw it, it wasn't to their taste. Different Man was interesting because there was such a split between the Sebastian Stan stands of the Apprentice performance or of the Different Man performance. Different Man won one of the early sort of independent festival prizes. And I think as people were deciding if it was too controversial to have a movie that was about Donald Trump and his mentor, um, and then maybe as they were thinking it might be a thumb in the direction of the president, however they thought about it, they opted to go towards The Apprentice in actor and supporting actor to see what they could make of that. So, but A Different Man was definitely a darling of the indie scene. And Sing Sing, I think, was early on considered to be maybe not only a Best Picture candidate, but an easy win for Best Picture. I think it just feels like enough people didn't see it, or
Mhm.
I've actually heard lately that a lot of people were confused because they thought it was a musical because it was called Sing Sing, even though that's the name of the prison. Maybe they thought it was a double meaning, and that the theatrical people in the jail were actually putting on a musical. So I don't know if they were confused or what it was. It just didn't go like they wanted. One movie that I guess got snubbed, except for in cinematography, was Maria. There was a long time where
Mhm.
everybody thought Angelina Jolie would not only win Best Actress, but they certainly thought she'd be nominated. And usually playing the part of a real person, in this case, opera singer Maria Callas, is usually a meal ticket to getting your Oscar nomination. Playing Bob Dylan worked for Timothy Chalamet. If
Yes.
he does win, it'll be both the hustle of his campaigning, the love for that movie, and the fact that Adrian Brody, his biggest competition, is playing a fictional character. So all of a sudden, playing a real person, whether you play Winston Churchill or you play a British Prime Minister always works. It works for Meryl
Yes, it
Streep,
does.
Gary Oldman. Um, but a real person with makeup even helps. There's also a correlation between the makeup award and a Best Acting award. So the last couple of
Mhm.
years, we've had Jessica Chastain for The Eyes of Tammy Faye. This year, if Demi Moore wins, it could be if we see the substance win in makeup, that might help us know that that was happening, or Brendan Fraser in The Whale. Um,
Mhm.
so a lot of times I think they think of it as an acting performance plus the makeup makes an even better performance. And sometimes when the person is played by is a real person that they're trying to look like, that helps a lot. But I'm trying to think of any other snubs. I definitely think The Piano Lesson was a movie that Netflix didn't campaign as hard as they did maybe for Amelia Perez. It might have gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit. I could argue that maybe it wasn't as strong a movie as it was a play, and they might have gone for broke with a few things in that. We have an Atlanta-based actress, Danielle Deadwyler, who for 2 years in a row has been snubbed. She was the star of Till, who was spectacular in
Mhm.
that, and she was also a supporting candidate for Piano Lesson. She's great in that as well. So hopefully her day will come soon. But Yeah, I definitely think a lot of people were surprised at some of the misses that you mentioned. And I think a lot of people were surprised no Clarence Macklin as supporting actor in Sing Sing. But for the most part, I think a lot of things that people were expecting to get in this year did get in. It might have also been a lower volume movie year, so there weren't as many things that you were possibly considering for the candidates for the top honors. So it might have been like, yeah, Sebastian Stan got in, and that might have left somebody like Paul Mescal in Gladiator 2 out, but no one thought he was going to get in.
Yes, definitely. And so many environmental factors as well. So many things that are current events related that can really influence how people feel about, a particular nominee at the time. If it was 5 years ago or 2 years from now, it might have been a shoe in.
You're right. Well, this year, because of the LA fires, a lot of people didn't get to maybe watch the screeners as fast. Some people say that the I'm Still Here movie got seen more because some of the deadlines got pushed and the Golden Globes came on before they got to nominate people, and they'd seen Fernando Torres's performance and then got it in. So the fires had some effects and then different effects. I would also say that if the nominations happened and now the people are voting between February 11th and 18th, you've got
Hmm.
something like this Saturday where they're going to announce the Directors Guild Association and the Producers Guild Association. What wins there could validate somebody's choices and say, hey, I feel pretty good. Or like, wow, Amelia Perez wins one of them. And they're like, oh, I don't want this to be an inevitable conclusion. Let me vote for something else. The SAG wins are February 23rd, and the BAFTA wins are February 16th. Those are also considered precursors usually for what's going to win the Oscar. But I think both the SAGs and the BAFTAs will almost be after the nomination period. So we won't know till afterwards if the same sentiments that have some overlapping awards bodies would have picked the same things or not. I think the BAFTAs last year picked things pretty accurately, and 2 years
Hmm.
ago they almost were completely inaccurate in predicting. The British
Yes.
Association.
So it's very interesting how the whole award season really influences the Oscars, and the Oscars is definitely still seen as the quintessential awards event, but so many things at play.
You can look a lot at last week's Sundance Film Festival, which is sort of the first major festival of the year, as predicting a lot of the things that we're going to see next year in documentary, because
Mm.
there were two or three that sort of came out there that were already being looked at heavily as being interesting on the map. And they might play at the Venice Festival and the Cannes Film Festival and other places throughout the year and pick up momentum. I look at this year's documentary features, and Porcelain War and Sugarcane are two that were really buzzed about last year at Sundance. And sure enough, they're in the top five. Also interesting that all five documentaries that got nominated this year are international in theme. So you've got one, Black Box Diaries from Japan, No Other Land, the West Bank, Porcelain War in Ukraine, Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat in the Congo, and then Sugarcane in British Columbia. So it's just interesting that the globalization of the Oscars is having a lot of effects, and maybe that international tales are something that we're looking to be able to share even more globally.
Yeah, that's so interesting to see how that all kind of influences as well, and you've
It,
got so much.
it used to be if you made a movie about Hollywood, you were a shoe-in. There was a movie this year about a swimming teacher in Hollywood, and there are a lot of people who are predicting it. They're like, wow, he probably taught a lot of the actors and people who are in Hollywood. So, it's an inspirational story about a swimming teacher. It could be up there. And then there was no swimming teacher in there. They were all on really important topics around the world.
Yeah, that's yeah, I think that's definitely the La La Land effect. Hollywood really loves movies about
Absolutely,
Hollywood.
between the
That
artist and all these different movies that are about the making of movies.
right.
That's
Yes.
something that The Brutalist has going for it. Whereas, even though he's an architect in the movie, anybody who's followed what the director has said in his interviews and what he's talked about, The Brutalist is also about the struggle of making movies. And I think the director worked on it for 7 years, tried to raise the money himself, went through several different actors. In fact, Sebastian Stan was originally going to play the lead in The
Mm.
Brutalist as well. He could have been up for three this year.
Right, right.
Um, but he's sort of saying that in a certain way, he's making a parallel statement to the immigrant experience in America, which is his story per se. But a lot of it is about trying to make a movie under the guise of a difficult patron and producer relationship. And
Mhm.
once you've seen that movie, if you think about it that way too, it's rather hard not to think about it that way. When I saw it, I didn't even know that was part of it. Um, but I just thought it was a powerful immigrant movie. And
Mhm.
definitely I could see it as well. It's like, I guess Guy Pearce's character is like the film producer, and Adrian Brody's character is like the guy who doesn't have much control,
All the
but is
symbolism, I
brilliant.
love it. I love it. We have another comment here. I'm pretty sure I went to GFA class with Stephen back in 2022, the Georgia Film Academy 1000. And he says, I think the recent Dune movies are some of the best in the last few years. Dune 1 got several awards, but it's unfortunate that Dune 2 got snubbed.
And first of all, which classmate was that?
Joshua Lofton?
Joshua, hello.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. One of my clients is actually the Georgia Film Academy, and I think Joshua and my colleagues may have thought I was a narc because, a lot of 20-something people taking the class, and all of a sudden I'm showing up to build cameras and light sets and light kits with them. But loved taking that class and learned so much from the fellow students there, and have such an appreciation for filmmaking given what I learned of taking a class like that. So I highly recommend it if there's even a way you can take an elective that is a filmmaking class through the Georgia Film Academy. I think mine was through Clayton State. It was the way I got it. I don't know exactly how that worked, but love that. But yes, to the point about Dune, I think people have responded to the Dune movies in a major way. I will say that I think the people who were campaigning Dune 2, in this case, the Warner Brothers collective of people, were trying to appeal to the sensibilities of the Academy by acting like it was a Lawrence of Arabia style desert adventure. So, knowing that science fiction movies don't do that well with the Academy, they're like, okay, let's play this up more as an epic that takes place in a desert with mighty warriors and such. And so they definitely got into a lot of categories, but maybe not as many. Interestingly enough, another movie that took place in a desert this year was Furiosa, the prequel to the Mad Max movies. The last Mad Max movie did super well. If I'm correct, it may
Mhm.
have gotten as many as 10 nominations. It was very much a surprise nominee that Hollywood took to. And I think in that case, they were maybe, they liked how inventive it was. They liked the stunt work. They liked George Miller's body of work. And then Furiosa, they just completely forgot this year. It wasn't up for anything. Even on the SAG Awards, where they have a best stunt category, they didn't even put it up. So it's interesting. They sometimes will not catch on till it's many years later about science fiction or movies that take place in space. They're much more likely to like Gravity, which is more of a contemplative movie that takes place with just two actors in outer space than an outer space adventure, so to speak. So there's a lot of times where you won't see some of the favorite epics in the science fiction genre get in. Just
Yeah, I still am surprised, pleasantly surprised that Shape of Water won as well. So that
That's
was
true, which was
that was kind
basically
of
like
a
a Universal monster movie reinvented. I think in that case, Guillermo del Toro, such a beloved figure in international films and Hollywood, I think he helped bring that to a victory. I think it was
Mhm.
um, an unexpected and very different choice for the Academy to put as Best Picture.
I agree, but I think it definitely heralded a trend of looking at more genre movies as
Yeah, it
well.
did. A
Yeah.
lot of people seeing something like, Everything Everywhere All at Once. That
Hmm.
definitely was such a mix up of genres. And I think if it didn't have the full emotional beat that it had about it being a family facing these things, that it might you gotta have a couple elements to be that best picture winner. And in some cases, it has to have like a strong emotional tie to get some people. They'll put up with something that's a little bit zanier or a little bit different. They like that sometimes. Some years they're not as into that. Sort of depends on what you're up against and if you think, your movie feels the most different or in some cases the most different, but also the most populist.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the Green Books and the Blind Sides and
Yeah,
what have
sometimes you
you, I
get
think.
something that is definitely more old-fashioned.
Yeah, a lot of big budget Hollywood, well produced, but not necessarily really moving things forward,
Right. I think
necessarily artistically.
a lot of times movies that may be off their game as far as maybe race relations as they feel today. And Hollywood might be 10 years behind or something with something like or more than 10 years behind in some cases with Crash and Green
Yeah,
Book.
kind of a safer choice there
Yeah,
in
or
that
kind of this
way.
white savior movie like A Blind Side. That's like you wouldn't go for that now. And it might have been like Sandra Bullock's popularity that year. There was a weak
Mhm.
Best Actress selection that year, so she was very likely to win a career performance there, and may have just helped in that to propel it to a nomination for the Best Picture too.
Mhm. So, well, I do have I think my final question to you. Well, I have a two-parter, but I think what are you really looking for in a good movie? What makes a good movie to you?
So for me, I think being a best in its genre is important to me. So if you're going to make a coming of age movie, is it going to be heartfelt? Am I going to feel like it's relatable to everybody coming of age? So whether it is, trying to remember the name of the movie a couple years ago. Um, oh gosh, it was about being a teenager for sure. It might have been called there are a couple of movies called 13. I don't remember which one.
Oh,
But
maybe
it's
Boyhood or
well, Boyhood is my favorite movie, so I know I like that one in the coming of
oh,
age.
nice.
This was another one. The director of it is like Bo Burnham, and
Oh, yes, yes, yeah, yeah. Okay, I think that one
he
was
did a movie
13
about a
as well.
young
Yeah,
girl, and she's signing off all of her videos.
or was it
Uh,
eighth grade
Eighth grade
or
is what that one's
something?
called. Yes.
Yeah.
So, coming of age movie, whether it's about a boy or girl or somebody in between, it would definitely be that it's heartfelt and that everyone could relate to it because that's such a perfect vessel for watching somebody grow and change in a movie. So from the beginning of a movie to the end, was there an arc? And I think that's why I like Boyhood so much. It's like, wow, there's
Mm.
never been a better arc than that. Like he's 7 in the first scene and
So
he's
true.
17 in the last. And they didn't even
Yes.
say like 1 year later, 1 year later, 1 year later. It just he grew up before your eyes. So highly recommended, by the way. But so coming of age movies, I'm sort of I don't know. I'm a stickler for did that really tell me something about growing up? Horror movie. Is it truly chilling? It could be gross or not gross. It could have a lot of jump scares or a lot of good kills or a lot of things, but um, does it advance the form a little bit? Does it do all the right things? Does it elevate things? Does it advance things a little bit? So I think, in the genre that it's in, is it doing a great job? Are all those crafts coming together for reasonably good acting, solid direction, solid script? I think, if you notice that one of those things is off, it can really mess up the others.
For sure, absolutely. And then to kind of cap it off, just why do you love movies?
For me, I'm definitely, this is not to take away from actually being spiritual or my spirituality, but I definitely feel like going into a movie theater is like sort of communing with global storytelling. It's sitting there and really escaping for 2 or 3 hours to somebody's vision. And that can be a great experience or it can be a bad experience. The experience of being in that theater or watching it. I grew up working in movie theaters, working in video stores, doing all this movie reviewing. So I've always surrounded myself. So it's almost hard for me to imagine a world without movies. My parents are always telling me that they're wanting to go to the senior movie because they get half off or something. And they're always looking for the bargain to go to movies. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, movies are like oxygen to me. I was like, I would hate for them to keep going up in price, but like nothing's stopping me from seeing them. And I definitely hope that it will be a tradition people will continue to love. I've actually really liked the fact that in the past 2 years, people have been going back to the movies, whether it was a Barbenheimer year where all of a sudden everybody was
Yay!
going to both. They tried to make it happen with the Wicked Gladiator 2 this year. They went to one of them. Uh, but I definitely think event pictures. I mean, I get so excited when, Taylor Swift movie is ruling the box office, or whether it's, a horror movie like Barbarian, or, something else that's all of a sudden taking over the box office. So if it's a movie that's successful in what it's trying to do, I love it, and I love to hear people talking about it. And it saddens me when I'll like mention something about a couple movies and someone will be like, wow, the last time I went to a movie theater was, and they'll mention something like 9 years ago. And I'm just like, oh, and yeah, I love streaming as much as the next person, but it's not quite the same.
Mhm.
And I think I'm even on my phone a lot of times. I'm starting to write my review while I'm watching it. When I'm in the comfort of my home. So the idea about just being able to be in the room, possibly with other polite people, all experiencing the same communal of storytelling, is still something that I love. And I think seeing a story told really well is something we're all going to crave, even if we're in a generation where watching a lot of TikToks in succession is the way we're consuming a lot of good stories quickly, or whether sometimes we're wanting to sit back for a 3.5 hour with an intermission brutalist.
I love all of that, Stephen. I agree. It really is a spiritual experience, especially going into the movie theater. Thank you so much for joining us and spending your time with us. We really appreciate it. I'm going to post some links for the students where they can find you and connect with you and ask you some other questions if they have them about everything that we've talked about, and definitely about the Atlanta Film Festival and any of your recommendations for getting involved in the Atlanta film community here, and in making your life about movies as we do, which is awesome and fulfilling, in
Well,
my
feel free to
opinion.
link in with me, as she said, on the Stephen Michael Brown. If there's anything that I didn't even completely answer or got part of it, I'm going to find the name of that portal to enter your short films. If some of you want to write, take a stab at a movie review, I'm game to work with you. And just look forward to staying in touch. And it's great to see fellow classmates, Joshua, and definitely Dr. Hutchins. Always a pleasure to spend time with you. You've been a great friend and a spectacular professor for the students.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much, Stephen. Thank you.